what drew me to you is an unbelievably difficult childhood. Born in Canada, don't know the specific details, but in foster care as a child. And I believe at the age of 15, a pretty unbelievable, shocking experience happens to you that it feels like set the course for where we are today. It's your story. And so I want you to pick us up there at that young age, your kind of mid-teen years, and something bad happens. Take us to that. What led to that and what happened that day?
When I go back to the 15, 16-year-old Dan, he was definitely angry. A lot of demons. I grew up in a home with an alcoholic mom. Dad wasn't around very much, traveling in sales. A lot of hyperactive. I mean, I was diagnosed with ADHD, I think, when I was 11. Put on Ritalin. So there was like a period just right off the bat where I felt broken, I think, as a person. And I got introduced to drugs when I was 13, and that's when my life spiraled kind of out of control. When one decision led to another bad decision, to a series of bad decisions, and I found myself high and drunk in a stolen car in a cop chase at 16 years old. Luckily, which at the time I didn't consider lucky, I was as I was trying to get away. I had a handgun in a backpack sitting next to me because I told myself if the cops caught me, I was going to pull the gun and let them take my life.
Wow.
As I was in this neighborhood, in this high-speed chase, I tried to take a turn going way too fast, and I smashed into the side of this house. And I went for the gun. And for whatever reason, as I pulled on that handle, the gun got stuck. Next thing I knew, the cops opened the door and grabbed me and threw me in the back of the cop car, and I woke up sober the next day in a jail cell wondering what my life was going to look like. And there was a point where I just thought maybe life would just be easier if I took my life. There was suicidal thoughts, and I didn't feel worthy of breathing the air, taking space, honestly. So anyways, I eventually had a guard sit me down and look at me, and just for no reason other than he felt I needed to hear the words. He said, "You don't belong here. And if nobody's ever told you, I believe in you."
Wow. Do you remember his name?
Yeah.
What's his name?
His name was Brian.
Brian.
Yeah. And he said, "You got to get out of here." He goes, I've been here for 10 years. I've seen a lot of kids. There's a lot of kids out there. You don't belong here. And at first I was like, well, what does he know? He doesn't know me. But it planted this seed of some kind of belief. I'm like, he could get in trouble even just pulling me out to tell me this. He wasn't my caseworker. He wasn't, he had no reason to tell me this. And I kind of started to believe it a little bit.
Did you walk out of there wanting to prove him right because he was maybe one of the few people who believed in you?
That was the thing that shifted. Like, prior to that, and look, maybe there were other adults in my life that were also trying to speak that. What was different about Brian, and this is where I've learned over the years that the messenger matters, because of who he was. And literally, he pulled me out of the hole. I was in solitary confinement. He grabs me out of this place. I was there for 3 days. Walks me past the door of the cell blocks where we stayed into the next door, which was the guard unit that no inmate's supposed to be in, to sit me down and say this. And I think because of who he was, it landed. And I think that's one of the most beautiful lessons I've learned since then, is that sometimes when other people believe in you, even if you don't have that belief, there's this part, like you said, that I just figure if he saw that, maybe it's there, and I just don't want to let him down. I got out, I did the work, and then I got released. I didn't want to go back. But it was 11 months of doing it. A couple times I ran down that driveway saying, "I'm out of here." I turned around.
I've seen you talk on social about some of the things you learned in that time. And I love that about your story. You come across a coding book, if I recall.
Totally, yeah.
What makes you dive into it the way that you did?
It was a long day. It was summertime because I asked to stay a little longer because I was scared. I mean, the thing about recovery is it's really easy to be sober when you're like I was hundreds of miles away from where I grew up in the woods on a lake. It was an old church camp. So I asked to stay longer to help Rick, the maintenance guy, kind of, I don't know, just get a few more reps. You know, I was not living there anymore, but I was nearby and I was helping. And so I remember the day because I was cleaning out this camp, and I don't know, there was just something about when I opened that room and there was a like kind of a built-in desk into this little room in one of the camps or cabins. And there was an old computer, dusted. It'd been there for a few years. Nobody touched it. I mean, nobody'd been in that room for probably 6, 7, 8 years. And it was an old 486 computer and and it was like a bright yellow book on Java programming sitting right there. And we didn't have a computer growing up. I just opened it up, thought it would be like super cryptic, and it read like English. So I was just like, honestly, I was probably trying to kill time. You know, like I don't want to keep lifting. We were moving. There was like an old gym set and desks and
that's
furniture. Yeah, I was like, I'm going to sit here and see if I can get a game start or something. Right. But I just followed the instructions of that book, and 20 minutes of tapping and just reading it and just hit enter and it says hello world. At that moment, I remember thinking to myself, like maybe the reason I got in so much trouble is because my brain works different than everybody else. And it's not that I'm broken, it's just the way the world is, I'm different. And this might be my thing. So I remember telling my dad about it, and I kept playing around. And I remember I had 2 passions at that point. One was botany, plants, if you can imagine why.
Yeah.
The other one became computers. And I remember my dad saying to me, he goes, you should have a garden as a hobby. This computer thing is what you should focus on. This is 96, 97, 98. So, I mean, the internet, this little thing just started. And there's this great quote I heard my buddy Chris tell me the other day. I forget who said it, but he said, the ironic part about life is you can only make sense of it looking backwards, but it has to be lived forwards.
Oh, I love that.
But when I look at my life, perfect sense.
Sure.
At the time, what a mess.
Well, speaking of living forward, as a part of your story, you speak to young men in prison now.
All the time.
All the time.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm curious about. What are you speaking to these young men about? You could speak to them about a lot of things, and I'm sure maybe you do. But what is the message that you really want to get across to these young men that are behind bars?
Every time I go in, I always recenter. Because I understand when I go in there, I know what I look like. And unfortunately, I don't look like those kids. And that's one of the first things I say. I know what I look like. So I always kind of get grounded in my heart and remind myself that I'm no different, that I was those kids. And like, I remember sometimes I bring my team, my assistant. Last time, my assistant was there and she never seen that side of my world at that level. And she was almost in tears just walking around this place. She's like, what? This is how they live? And I'm like, yeah. She's like, are they that bad? I'm like, no. They just made bad decisions. So when you ask me, what do I tell them? I share some things, but what I want them to feel from me is I'm no different than you.
Yeah, it's a form of you just transferring belief to them.
I want them to know that they're actually so equipped to just come back into the world and just absolutely take advantage. Like, they're the most entrepreneurial kids. They've got all the streets. Every skill set that they had that caused them to be there is actually the exact same skill set applied differently to give them the tools to be successful. They just didn't have anybody to show them that.
Yeah.